Welcome to the Cultivating Leaders Podcast, where we get inside the minds of leaders to harvest great ideas and lessons that can help you grow as a difference maker in food and agriculture. I'm your host and curiosity captain, Nicole Ursig. Today we have with us a guest that I am so excited about because I have followed her on social media for years. So to get to meet her in person and have her on the podcast is just amazing. Diana Kander. She is a serial entrepreneur who entered the United States from Ukraine at the age of 8. And Diana had launched and sold millions of dollars worth of products and services by her early 30s. #goals. Today, she is an innovation consultant, an innovation keynote speaker, and a New York Times bestselling author whose books have been taught in over 100 universities. And her parents would like you to know that her sister is a doctor. Diana, welcome to the pod. What did I miss from your bio?
That's a pretty good amount. I think you got the highlight.
Okay, I have to admit, I stole the joke from your, obviously your website. Tell me, that made me giggle when I read it, so I had to share it. Tell me about your, what makes you share things like that? It's funny.
Oh, well, my sister's 13 years younger than me, and there's only two of us, and she's been the baby the whole time. My parents just adore her and want to tell everyone about her all the time. So, if I have been jealous of any human being, it's my sister.
Are you the oldest?
Yep, I'm the older sister.
It's just the two of you?
Yep,
Oh, same. I am also an elder sister, and the baby is just always the baby.
she gets everything. Yeah.
They can do no wrong, right? Okay, so you work with a lot of high-powered people as a consultant speaker. Curious your perspective, what do you think makes a leader?
That's a great question. I think leading versus managing. So when you're a manager, it's your job to make sure that people are doing the things that they're supposed to do. And when you're a leader, it's your job to inspire people of what they're capable of. So it's a lot less push and a lot more like helping find the goal that exists in themselves, which is usually even more than what you could manage them to do.
I love that. Okay, so what do you feel like is a common superpower that separates the good leaders from the great ones that you get to work with or that you have seen?
The incredible leaders have a very healthy amount of humility about them. So they don't always have the right answer. They let other people have a turn. They are curious, which I think curiosity and humility go hand in hand. They let other people lead. That's the old adage is like the definition of a leader is how many leaders you've created. And so I think that humility is a very underappreciated skill set that the greatest leaders I've seen that produce the greatest results exhibit.
Okay, so I think a lot of times when we think about leaders, they tend to be people, whether not always, but who have big egos or big personalities. So tell me, if I am someone who is maybe a charismatic leader or a front of the room type of person who maybe does have that big ego, how do you're saying the best people are humble and have humility. Can both exist?
There's a very simple test on how to know how humble you are. Would you like to take the test?
Yeah. Okay, I'm a little scared, but yes.
What percentage of your daily decisions would you say are wrong? Professional decision.
Oh, that more than I'd care to admit.
What do you think? 0 to 100. What percent of your daily decisions are probably wrong?
I'm gonna say 30. I mean, not a bad decision maker, but I'm a human.
Solid answer. So the higher up you go in a company, the lower the number goes, as you can imagine. So the higher the leader, they're like, oh, maybe 5%, maybe 10%. But actually, according to researchers in game theory, roughly 50% of our daily work decisions are incorrect. And that's because oftentimes you're making decisions based on incomplete information. So you're just guessing for a lot of things. You don't know the future, or circumstances of the situation change after you've made the decision. If you think about people who had cruise tickets in March of 2020, and they were like, should we still go? I don't know. We got a good deal. So circumstances have changed. And yet, because you think so few of your decisions are wrong, you're not looking to make changes or adjustments, and you just keep digging a hole with your wrong decisions because you said you would. And the leaders that know that a lot of their decisions are wrong for those two factors are constantly looking to see what is changing in the environment and where they need to make adjustments. And so it's the ones that are constantly shifting, reevaluating, assessing, and being willing to be wrong that are the ones that grow the fastest.
Okay, so you're saying like they maybe still have confidence and a bit of an ego in a good way that I make good decisions, but I know that some of those decisions are going to be wrong, so I'm always going to adjust.
Yes. So I have strong opinions loosely held.
Ah, yes. Okay.
So I believe very strongly in the things that I believe, but I'm very open to being wrong, and I'm looking for information about being wrong and constantly asking people for that feedback. And I don't think the higher up you go in an organization that leaders have these kinds of feedback loops that would even be dare to tell them if they were obviously wrong.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so if I am a leader high up in an organization and I don't have that feedback loop, at AFA we always talk about how feedback is a gift. How do I cultivate that? How do I build a good feedback loop?
Well, I think one of the first steps that you could do is an annual anonymous survey of the people that report directly to you, and to have enough people take the survey that you can't tell who said what, and to make people believe that there will be no retributions. I've definitely seen leaders do anonymous surveys and then yell at people for what they said, and that's definitely not curiosity or humility, but it's to have somebody else maybe help you sit with what was said, and then share back with your team, like, here's what was said and here's what I would like to work on over the next 12 months. And that shows your interest in learning and improving, and you're now leading by example.
So obviously you have a ton of great knowledge and advice and get to work with some amazing people. Tell me obviously I read your bio, but tell me about your leadership journey. Like how did you recognize that you were a leader and that this was the type of work that you were meant to do?
Well, I would say I have a very roller coaster leadership journey. So I started as an entrepreneur in my 20s, and I started a business that grew really quickly. And I was managing people who were working in 20 different states. It was like a pretty large operation very quickly. I was in my early 20s, and I made every leadership mistake in the book because I went from law school to running a business, and there was no management training. And I was just trying to do my best. Then, when I became an author and a speaker, maybe 5 years ago, I did this exercise where I was working on a book about really great leadership and how leaders have a much stronger impact on the people that work for them than they think, and about how a lot of leaders have leadership principles, but in their moments of stress actually exhibit very negative qualities that they aren't even aware of. And while I was doing these interviews, I asked people to give me their worst bosses. Like, I asked people to share who was working for the worst boss imaginable. And then I called those people and interviewed them for their leadership principles. And wouldn't you know it, like, all the worst bosses imaginable have like a very strong theory of what makes a good leader. And so that made me think, man, maybe I was one of these terrible bosses. And so I contacted every person where the work relationship didn't work out. They were fired for some reason, and I had a story in my head about what that was. And I contacted all those people and said, can we have a conversation? And I'll just listen. And you tell me everything I did that was wrong. And I did that for a month. And it was the hardest month of my life because I thought stories ended a certain way. And I was telling myself something, and they told me a completely different side of me and how it impacted them for the rest of their career in negative ways. And I was a puddle of mud. And I left that experience saying I never want to make another person feel that way again. And so now I'm like an overcorrective leader. Now I feel like I have both the skill set and the desire to be a good leader, as opposed to somebody who's trying to achieve objectives and results and has to deal with people to get it accomplished.
What Okay, so obviously you're an author, but like that takes bravery to be like, "Hey, it didn't work out. You probably don't like me. Now tell me everything that's wrong."
It was really hard to get some of them to even get on the phone with me. One person still won't speak to me, and the people that did weren't very nice. I don't know how else to say it, but Hopefully we are not the same people that we were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And it is these conversations that I think have changed who I am as a person. And I'm so grateful that those people took the time when they were clearly still mad at me to tell me how my story was different than their story. For instance, I'll give you an example. So I had an employee and it wasn't working out. And I was encouraging them to like look for other opportunities. And I think I even introduced them to like a headhunter. And I was like, I'm setting you up here. Like, I'm helping you find other opportunities. And they said that like traumatized them because I never was direct about what I didn't like about their work. I just tried to help them find a new job without giving them clear, direct feedback about what was happening and setting clear expectations. And I was like, oh, I thought I was being nice, but really I was covering up the real gift of us being on the same page.
I think it's so just brave and courageous to even try and have those conversations. And I am curious because all of us deal with feedback in the workplace, and it is never easy to hear. How did you take that and decide to channel it into something good? Because obviously, it was it was painful to hear too.
I think it's about being open to believing other people and having even an idea about who you are being loosely held and saying, okay, well, if these people had this experience, then how can I change how I am in the world to improve the experience of others?
But scary too. I think that like even what you're talking about, right? Like to hold your own identity as a person of like, okay, this is who I am, but I'm willing to accept other people's versions of that, loosely holding it. That's wow, that's something I'm gonna have to think about, right? Because who you are is a like that's foundational, that's core. And to be like, okay, I'm sure this is who I am, and also I'm willing to hold that loosely.
So who I am is a person that means well and wants to be better. That's my core definition of myself. So I am open to feedback and opportunities to improve because I am also, my definition of me is I am a normal, fallible human being. But hopefully people know that I didn't mean like negative things and that I want to change my behavior if given the opportunity.
Yeah. All well-intentioned things, just maybe like the message sent wasn't message received.
Correct.
Amazing. Okay, so how do you feel like do you have an example of okay, I learned this and now I'm different or this version of me does things differently after you've learned all of these things?
Oh, well, I had really strong assumptions about what I was trying to do to help other people. And now, a lot of leaders have this policy that they have an open door for people to come give them feedback. And my philosophy is if you're not hearing information that is surprising, then nobody's coming through that door. You need to go out there and get people to tell you that. So I actually have a practice that I use with the people that I work with on a weekly basis. It's called a team process improvement meeting, and it takes just 15 minutes. And what you do is you search your feelings for everything that has happened in the last week. Any kind of communication usually happens with communication that led you to be frustrated, confused, angry, even excited, elated. And then you say, what was the process that happened that led to these feelings? And then we talk about whether we should have a new process because most processes, most things that you do at work are actually unspoken things. Like you never talked about how you would email certain parts of this podcast episode, and you might not be on the same page. So talking about things before they blow up into huge things that make you crazy is an awesome opportunity to reduce tension from a relationship.
Whose responsibility do you think that is? If I'm a manager, is it my responsibility to make sure that I am seeking that out from my team members? Or if I think about myself as a team member, is it my responsibility to make sure that I'm not letting those things fester and coming in and expressing some of them to my manager?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's 1,000% the leader's responsibility because I've worked with people who were used to this process with me, and then they went to go work for another employer, and they were like, "Hey, I have some feelings that I'd like to share," and 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 their new employer was like, "You keep those to yourself. That's not the kind of thing that we do around here." So, I think that's a leader's responsibility.
I love that. That's a great thing. I'm gonna have to think about implementing that. Um, Okay, you've been on an amazing leadership journey. Tell me, what is a leadership or business lesson that you wish you had learned sooner?
So the idea for the book that I was working on that decided not to publish was that leaders have one ideal version of themselves, who they are, but when they encounter moments of stress, so they're under a tight deadline or there's just pressure from other parts of their life, there's this shadow self of them with all of these negative qualities that they aren't aware of. And from the research, and we did hundreds of interviews, there were like the same kinds of things that we do as leaders when we are under stress that drive the people that work for us crazy. And so being cognizant of your shadow self and your tendencies under stress and sharing that with your team and letting them say back to you like, hey, you told us to mention when you were stressed and trying to micromanage us. Can is there a different way for us to do this project? I think will help you from sharing that stress and pressure with your team.
Okay, so you said there the way leaders have like key things that are in our shadow selves. What are some of those things?
I gotta look up the whole list.
I'm genuinely curious, and so I've taken us down a different path than we
Yes.
planned. But
Okay, here we go. Micromanagement is number one. Number two is reacting with anger and judgment to what happened. Number three is caring only about the deliverables and not about the team as human beings. Number four, not reinforcing positive performance. Number five, withholding negative feedback. Number six, ignoring the suggestions. And number seven, not dealing with an underperforming or toxic teammate. So just somebody that should be dealt with. Yeah. And the other thing that we learned that I think is very valuable for leaders to know is I think about the courage of your teammates as like a bucket of courage, okay, that they and every time they speak up in a meeting or share an idea, that's them placing a bet with all their courage chips. Do you know what I mean? Like gambling with it. And when they share that idea, if you have the opportunity as a leader to either double their bet or take away all their chips. So if somebody shares an idea and you say, "Oh, well, I guess we're just sharing any old idea today," then you've taken all their chips. They have an empty bucket of courage now. They will share nothing else. They will just be quiet from here on out. But if when they share, you say, "My God, that is an amazing idea. Thank you for sharing." You've now doubled their amount of chips and shoved it back in their bucket. And the more chips in their bucket, the more ideas they'll share, the more innovative they'll be, the more engaged they will be as an employee. And you, as a leader, need to understand your impact on that courage bucket of everybody that works for you.
I love that visual and especially like the emotional weight of it, right? Because going all in on a bet, and that fact that if you react wrong as the leader, they've basically lost everything, or they've doubled like, oh yeah, I've doubled the courage that I have now in the relationship or in sharing or in being open or doing something. Yeah, that makes the risk of the way you react as a manager or a leader feel even that much higher, honestly, for you to put it that way.
Yeah, be cognizant of how much power you have. So I interviewed these employees who would not be able to leave their house without their computer. They were terrified of their boss yelling at them over email. People who were like not seeing people socially, they were going to therapy, they had developed anxiety, like strong physical responses to the way that leaders were treating their people that the leaders had no idea about.
I think what you're pointing out is as someone's, so this is something I always think about as like my team members. So I know that as someone's boss, at the end of the day, no matter what, I am dinner table conversation. And am I leading in a way that when I meet that person's spouse or their mom or their grandma, are they going to be excited to see me, or are they going to be like, "Ooh, that's the lady, that's the one that has caused all this stress and turmoil." But I think all of us as leaders are just humans, and we look at these team members of like they're humans too. Where you don't see the power dynamic a lot, and so I think sometimes it's hard to recognize that the power is not in I tell you what to do, but it's in how much I like influence you have over how that person feels about themselves.
I think that a really valuable practice that any leader could have is to ask anybody they hire about their worst leader experience. And not only will you learn like, "Oh, man, I didn't know that was terrible. I will definitely be sure not to do that." And that's like one of the benefits of the research that we did. It's just like, "Oh, that's a thing you don't like? Okay." And the other benefit of it is you'll understand your employee so much better. So one of the examples is eh, when we interviewed people, somebody said anytime they turned in a draft that wasn't 100% perfect, their boss would like throw it at them. Okay. And so they had just a real, just visceral reaction to the word draft. And as a boss, you should know that about the people that you work with for when you ask them for a draft. So, because that's going to be in there for the rest of their lives. So make sure the people that are on your team, you could have a really fun conversation with them over lunch one day, like just name your worst leadership experience, and that'll be very instructive for you as the now super humble leader of learning pointers of what you could do better. Plus, they're going to be great stories.
Oh, yeah. I think we all have stories like
Yeah.
that, right? Okay, so that's a phenomenal question to ask your team member. I do want to talk a little bit about curiosity because you are the curiosity expert. So talk about how you have become an expert at teaching how to harness curiosity, and you're obviously a very curious person yourself. So how did that come to be?
Well, I started by studying expertise. And the pitfall of expertise is the more you know about a subject, the less curious you are about it. So the more successful you become, the less curious you are about how to do anything better. And there's a real expert plateau that happens once we figure out a way that works in our work environment. Our rate of learning grossly drops. Our rate of really big new ideas really slows down. And that's because curiosity is the space between what you know and what you don't know. And when you become an expert or very successful, you literally have no space. What you now have is to-do lists. You brainstorm all the different things you need to do because you're the expert. And it is our job to increase the size of that space in our everyday week and to make sure that we as leaders are constantly zooming out and seeing like what are the areas to improve, asking the questions that will create the space for ourselves and our teams to grow.
Okay, so how do you know like what questions should you be asking? Like how do you know how if I am someone who is this expert that you're talking about that maybe has I've declined in curiosity because I've gotten really good at what I do, which sounds like honestly, Diana, of like, okay, I was maybe really curious at one point. I learned and I became an expert. And the thing that got me this success was being curious. And now I'm not naturally curious. So how do I recognize that? And how do I know how to ask myself or other people the right questions?
It's because you think you're done. It's because you're looking at the wrong thing for your success metric. You're looking at revenue or whatever your personal success metric. And you're like, look at this. I'm killing it. Every year is better than the last year. And revenue is a lagging indicator. It is not the right metric. So for me, the way that I create space for growth is I say to myself on a scale of 1 to 10, where am I today to what I'm capable of as a leader, as a keynote speaker, as an author? And that answer is never 9 or 10. Like right now, that answer is like a 5.5. So, okay, now there's a big chunk of space available there. How do I fill that space? Now I get curious about how I can move up that chart. And so the trick is you create the space for growth. You ask yourself the kinds of questions that make you curious about what new level is possible for you to unlock.
Mm. Is that something that just comes natural to you, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I've been studying curiosity for 10 years and I feel like I still don't I feel like I know less today than I am capable of knowing. You know what I mean? So there's this Dunning-Kruger effect that a lot of people use to describe that the less you know about a topic, the more confident you are about it. But the other side of it is the more you know about a topic, the less confident you are that you know everything. That now there's this whole world of things that you could explore. So I actually have a new book I just finished that's diving even deeper into curiosity and all the different habits you as a leader can practice on a daily basis to constantly stay curious. But I feel like I can write 100 books on curiosity topics and helping leaders. Like I just think I'm not even scratching the surface of what's possible.
I love that. That feels like job security.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a leader. Give me 3 practical tips that I can do to be more curious or be better at curiosity.
Okay. Uh, if you're a leader and you want to be more curious, so there are really two main ways. The first is get really curious about what's working, which means it's very easy to be busy, but there are only a handful of things that are driving the key results in your business. So identify what an 8, 9, or 10 project initiative looks like for you and get very vigilant about saying no and putting down the things that are not serving you. So we started this conversation by talking about just because I said let's do this thing, let's not keep doing this thing if it's not an 8, 9, or 10. So how do we constantly reevaluate our work to make sure that we're only spending our time on what matters most? Second, how do we not wait until something goes terribly wrong to get better? So how do we use every project as an opportunity to learn? So I do something called an after action review after every single keynote, which I'll do 40 to 50 times a year. I'll go over every slide of the presentation that I'm giving today. And then on every slide, I'll be like, could I have done this better? How they reacted to this one. Maybe there's another idea I could bring into this. And so instead of saying, oh, I'm going to revamp how I do this process 40, 50 times a year, I come up with 20, 30 things. So you can imagine the delivery of what it is that I do changes significantly by the end of the year. And it's an awesome opportunity to involve your team and to say, hey, we are a team that just constantly improves whether things work or not, so that when something doesn't go well, your team will feel safe to share what could have been better instead of feeling threatened like you're just looking for somebody to be in trouble. So figure out what works the best and double down on that. Figure out what can be better. Nothing is ever 100% a success or a failure. So figure out how to get better at every single turn. And number three, get a different definition of a failure or something that doesn't work as an experiment that really makes you stronger for the future. Because there's nothing that you've done in your life. I'm sure you could tell me your greatest, most embarrassing failure and I could show you directly about how it's led to your professional success. So helping our teams feel that way and not be scared to share things that aren't working so that we can deal with them faster is really the key to having curiosity drive your growth.
Okay, so it's really interesting to me because you're talking about, okay, how do we find in our businesses what's working best? Do more of that. Create this space for our team to share that constant feedback loop. But I'm really and you're talking about like, okay, how do you define what works best? Because nothing's ever 100, and what a failure is. And you said earlier, revenue is not a great key performance indicator. So tell me what in your business is. So like as you've laid that out for you and your team, like how do you define what those are?
Excellent question. So it's not revenue. My key performance indicator is how many referrals I get for other speeches with every speech that I deliver. So it's not even how satisfied the audience were or how satisfied the person that hired me was. It is how many people in the room, even if they're in the same organization, were like, other people need to hear this message. And when you just focus and whatever your business is, you figure out the customer metric that is your key performance indicator. And if you just leave your focus on that, how do I continuously create more value and more impact for the things that I'm trying to do? The revenue, oh my God, it will skyrocket. It will follow if you keep your eye on that key performance indicator.
I love that that's your key performance indicator because I think like as soon as you said it, I could tell like, of course, if people are referring you, then your revenue is great. Like
Yeah.
you're going to be successful in business. Um, wow, yeah. So I love that. I think here's my next question though is how did you determine that?
Excellent question. So I had my original training as an attorney, and attorneys, we don't create anything original. We start with somebody else's great ideas and we just edit the documents for our purposes. And the same is true. There's this great book called The Referable Speaker by Michael Port and Andrew Davis, in case you're curious, that outlines like here's what a referable speech is and here's how you get one. And I'm just continuously picking things that I think I'm already good at and saying, I think I could be better at this stuff. Like, how do I start from scratch? Even though I feel like I'm pretty good at this, I've been doing this a long time. I have so much more to learn, and being open about being better in those key areas will give you those golden nuggets that are going to drive your career.
So as the curiosity person, what's the most
You
important
could say queen.
Oh, I love it. Curiosity queen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some have said, some have said.
Some say. Diana's the curiosity queen.
Yeah.
Uh, what's the most important question that you ask yourself regularly?
Could I be doing anything better? Mom? That is my number one most important job in life, and I just want to make sure I apply all the same innovation principles to my parenting and my marriage as I do to my work. But I believe that innovation is not what you do. It's not a flying car or a new type of payment system. Innovation is how you do everything. And so if we could just practice these habits at home, then they will become natural to us in the workplace.
I love that. That it's, I mean, you're a whole human, whole person, and this mindset is seems to apply across your entire life.
Do good better, you know? That's the goal.
Yeah. Um, what's the best question you've ever been asked? Or the one you like to ask people the most?
I find that a lot of leaders, the higher up they are, the more likely it is that they have a collection of questions. They have questions that they like to ask in interviews that they've heard from other people. They have self reflection questions. So I have a collection of questions that I love. And I would say every person listening should start somewhere, like amazing questions that make them reevaluate. But mine is what would have to be true for something to happen? So instead of asking, is this possible? Is this feasible? Because if you're imagining big, it's probably not going to happen. But instead, asking, what would have to be true for this to happen will give you an amazing strategy and game plan for achieving impossible objectives. And that's one of my goals in life is to do impossible things.
Ooh, I love that. Uh, why? Like, why? Why is that your goal? Where does that come from?
I mean, there's just an unlimited number of levels out here in life, and setting stretch goals forces you to be a different human being on the other side of those goals. You can't do something innovative without being a different person, without innovating yourself in the process. And so I pick impossible goals to help myself grow and prosper.
What impossible goal are you working on right now?
My current impossible goal, we're recording this in November. I don't want to give away the date. We're recording this at the end of 2024. Is to go from somebody who has never played sports in my whole life to being a collegiate level tennis player in 1 year's time,
Ooh.
and I have achieved that goal. So yeah, I mean it's insulting to anyone who plays tennis who's listening, and I apologize for that. But I spent a lot of curiosity and resources and time to make that happen.
Okay, so I feel like a lot of leaders and very driven people, we love to achieve goals. Sometimes it becomes a checklist. So now that you have reached this level of tennis, are you gonna keep playing tennis for the rest of your life, or is it like, check, I got good at tennis, I did the thing, on to the next thing?
So it's been that way so far. I started setting impossible goals in 2018, and every year I set a goal, and I so far achieved each one, which is crazy because once you achieve one impossible thing, you understand that you are your own limitation. But tennis is my last goal that I will have set because I love tennis so much. I want to keep playing it for the rest of my life. So next year's goal is for me to interview Snoop Dogg on camera. This will make more sense with the keynote. But I'm a big fan of his wisdom practices, and I want to interview him to get, like, his business tidbits that have not been asked so far in any interview or podcast.
I love that. That's such a fun goal. I think you're gonna get there.
A lot of people are very positive when I share this goal with them, but I will say it's quite difficult. It feels impossible to me. So, don't play it.
Yeah, but what would have to be possible to make it
That's
happen
it.
is
That's it.
you just gotta meet the right person.
That's it.
I love that. Okay, so we are going to move into a segment that we call speed mentoring, Diana. Okay, so you obviously have a lot of leadership experience. I'm going to give you a couple scenarios, and if you were mentoring this person in one sentence, or as short as you can make it, what would you tell them? So, first up, this person is a CEO. They are leading an organization and they aren't sure if they should stay or go to help the organization grow.
I would say that if they're not prepared to change and grow, then they should probably go if they're even asking that question. But you don't have to be the same you a year from now. You can invest in yourself and do whatever needs to happen for the organization.
Okay, what advice would you give a first time manager? They have just got their first direct report and they are in the mode of, okay, now what do I do?
Oh, it's a great question. I would say establish a communication practice like the team process improvement meeting to continuously, because you're going to be making assumptions about how the situation is going that will be wrong. So figure out some way to uncover your incorrect assumptions.
Okay, so I am a professional in the workplace. I've received feedback that I feel isn't accurate. Maybe it's hard to hear, probably hurtful, but I don't feel like it describes me. How would you recommend handling that?
Well, there's two facets to this. Like there's the mental one, which is, you just it's probably not from the right source. My mom is very critical of what I wear on stage when I give speeches, but she's not the target audience, so it's fine. It's not an opinion that is important. So identify whether, like, the feedback meant well and is the kind of person you would come to advice for this topic. And if it's someone who's like your boss, then I am a terrible person to give advice in this area because I am clearly unemployed and am an entrepreneur. So I can't tell you how to do office politics. That's not my forte.
But you lead people.
For sure. I just don't know. Like, if you disagree with your boss and they gave you some harsh feedback, I would tell you to go talk to somebody else.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so this is a question that we love to ask at AFA, both of our students and of other people. We love hot takes. We love controversial opinions. So Diana, what would you say is your leadership or business hot take? This is like the, pineapple on pizza kind of thing that you believe about leadership.
Oh, I thought I had a good one. That the key to growth is doing less. A lot of people think that if they want to grow, they have to be busier and they have to do more. But really, most of your time is just wasted on stuff that isn't adding to the bottom line. So the more you can be focused and clear on what matters most, the more impactful you can be. So you don't have to actually work all day long. You can just figure out the levers that make the biggest impact and spend all the time that you want on those.
I like that. That's encouraging too. That feels positive. Of like, if I want to do more, be more. If I want to be more, I
Yeah.
can do less.
It feels very uncomfortable. Yeah, until you try it out and it works.
Love it. I think that's great advice. Okay, so at AFA, we are all about building bridges and connecting people. So, where can our people find and connect with you?
Oh, I'd love to connect with anybody listening. The best place is on LinkedIn. Uh, I connect with me. Don't just follow me, so we can have an exchange. And if you want to follow the annual big thing that I'm working on, my impossible goal, also Instagram would be a great place to follow me.
I can verify that she's a fun Instagram follow, as is her husband. Anything else that we should know or that you want to share with the audience, Diana?
This is something that I'm ending my keynote with today at AFA, which is change is going to happen. Change is inevitable, but your growth is entirely optional. So growth is something that you choose. It doesn't just happen, and you have to make space for it on purpose. So I hope that whoever's listening to this makes some space this week for growth and curiosity.
I love it. Thank you so much, Diana. This has been such a riveting conversation. I've enjoyed it. I've learned from it. And I just really appreciate you spending your time with us and sharing your expertise.